third member Q&A session. Thank you everyone again for joining us this afternoon. Just to let you know that this session is being recorded and will be posted onto our webpage, just like the first two sessions that we have hosted in the past month. Just keep in mind again that this is a open forum, so we're just going to provide you some quick updates on DL of what's happening out there in the industry and to see what where we at right now. Then towards the end, and it will be an open forum. That's when we can have everyone kind of share their feedback, any questions you may have, and concerns and whatnot towards DL. So just in this slide, we're just kind of going through the DL projects that are currently now active and currently what's happening and what are imminent and upcoming stages. Not a huge amount of transition and seeing more projects come into what's currently happening since on our last update on our previous session. Most of this imminent members on the side there are still going through the initial 90-day setup phase. So some of you may see these common project owner names that you guys are currently going through right now in terms of approvals or the process of within the 90 days. So they are very close and being active with the dedicated locator projects setting up through, and we do expect them to be currently in the happening list in the next coming month. And there's also multiple projects from the existing telecom projects that we are working with to transition, bringing all those existing legacy DL setups under the new model. So you do see a lot of the Bell or the Rogers legacy dedicated locate that we are transitioning over to the new model. So in most of those cases and in such new areas, you may be seeing those project acknowledgement come from us. This is where we're working with those telecom companies, transitioning them over to the proper DL model. In the upcoming list, it's pretty much stable in terms of who has shown interest, but hasn't necessarily moved forward with coming on board yet. So there's just preliminary conversation, trying to see their resources and such for their project. So moving on to the numbers that what we've seen. The numbers continue to increase in the total amount of requests coming through under the dedicated locator model. So just last month itself in May, we saw almost 3 times to what we saw the same the same month of last year. So you can see the biggest difference there from last year, May, we had 3,024, and May of this year, 2023, we see almost triple of that number now. So this just shows a great sign that dedicated locators here, we are working towards the industry itself. There is a number of increase, and we're seeing more greater usage of dedicated locator. So we're expecting that at the end of the year we should surpass the 100,000 requests going through Ontario One Call system that are directly related under dedicated locator as more project owners move into DL models and as well, as more resources become available. Now, this is also numbers between which regions are most active. This doesn't show a surprise that York has most active there, taking on 25%. This is mainly due to fiber to home projects such as Bell that is wrapping up their work within those locations there. So this data that we actually have is a full year data now. We are a full year into dedicated locator models, so our data is showing here from last year, June 2022 to most recent May 2023. So this is the top 10 active regions that we are seeing dedicated locator requests being active and active projects that are within the dedicated locator model. With that going said again, ties into which project owners are most active in dedicated locator. Prominently, we are seeing Bell Canada, like I said on our previous slide there, taking advantage and utilizing the use of dedicated locator to their fiber to home builds. So you can see on the top 3, top 3 itself, you see Bell, Rogers, and Enbridge taking that advantage and just ensuring that those projects where timelines are very sensitive, the installs are very sensitive, they are utilizing the dedicated locator model into the system itself. So in terms of DLSP, the availability, we broke it into active dedicated locator service provider and those who are close and those who are looking to get into the market. This slide here kind of just shows you all the listed active Dedicated Locator that are currently in the projects now. So we have the likes of GTEL, Multiview, ProMark, CLI, PBS, Acon, Premier, and HTP. These are all active DLSPs that have gone through the initial onboarding and have projects already active, boots on the ground. They are locating under a dedicated locator model. We also have several LSP who are close or are in the final stages working with the respective project owners and members affected to successfully onboard as a DLSP. So those are the LSP who are close. We have the names of CCS, Superior Locate, TransCanada, Ledcor, and Tierra, who are all in engaged conversation with multiple members with their project with their respective project owners that they're coming close to getting those requirements set up, agreements all set up. So we're what we're forecasting is within the next month or so, once they're completed in 90 days, that several of these LSPs who are close will be transitioning over to active DLSP. And just keep in mind that once they are an active DLSP, in some cases where members have onboarded these DLSPs and have set up an agreement, next coming up projects, the use of these the same DLSPs will be the same. So you can see the timeline can change based on the initial progression or the initial setup of onboarding an a non-active DLSP to an active DLSP. The timeline could be a lot less burden on the administration on that part. So in that case, they already have been set up as an agreement. They may have already mapping. So as we proceed with the dedicated locator model and as more resources come through, yes, there's that burden initially, but it'll just get easier as we go through, as the service agreements and mappings and whatnot will be already established by this DLSPs going on to following project owners. Next slide here is fairly interesting. Here it's a new symbol logo that we've have with our marketing that comes across Dedicated Locator. We are really pushing Dedicated Locator out there into the industry itself. So this is what you're just seeing, that we're putting around in certain areas at this banner that we're looking to have out in larger projects under the DL model. For example, if we have several Bell Canada fiber to home install sites to which these banners will be up and running or up in their fence lines of their project. We would just like to get more visibility out there of Dedicated Locator on sites, and it's a good way for owners of underground infrastructure or project owners to show their support under the Dedicated Locator program. If anyone else has a project where this would be appropriate or has an idea where we would be able to put up this signage, please do let me know. Or if anyone has any comments or feedback, we're certainly open to that. But our hopes is that any larger projects that are under these models to have the signage on their work site, is just it's great to have that around there. So just wrapping up the quick updates that we have here. And I want to open up the forum as soon as we have, give us more time to kind of go through the questions. I just want to touch base again to some of the frequently asked questions that we have had from previous sessions, and also, conversation we've had since with most of you from the first and two sessions. We've had follow-up conversations since then, and it's been great. Initiatives has been a great conversation we have since then. So just kind of going through there, mainly what we have here is what we're seeing is what is a new DL model intended to do, fix in comparison to the legacy model or going through the public stream. So just touching base on that, the new legal DL model is a new way and innovative step forward in delivering locates efficiently, on time, limiting delays in construction due to late locates. It also promotes safe dig practices. So with having a single resource made available at any given time for the project to provide or clarify any locate markings.
So I had a second link.
Excuse me.
And I went in a different way.
Oh.
Yeah, I just.
Sorry about that. So just keep in mind that just keep yourself on mute until we have our open forum there. My apologies. So just going back to it again, comparable to many versions, we have a lot previous legacy DL models. So this is for those that are looking, staying in the public stream or having that previous legacy model type. it was a voluntary basis by members. So when it was a voluntary basis with the DL legacy, the timeline still it still falls out of line in terms of having valid complete locate package for that project owner. So therefore, when the alignment falls in line in terms of the expiration, you're still not going to have that valid package on hand to proceed and schedule your project. So hence the reason why this new DL model was introduced. And there's really no room for the legacy model as it's not moving forward in terms of delivering proper on-time locates for these larger projects. So with the new legal deal model, all affected members within the prescribed projects do have the legal requirements to agree upon a DLSP to provide a locate service provider for the project. Second question that was being used there that was asked from previous session was what kind of projects is DL intended to be used for? I'm going to just pluck this out directly from the legislation itself. So there are three different criterias that is stipulated for the intent of DL. One is a designated broadband project. Two, an excavation or a dig project that satisfies such criteria or as prescribed by the ministry. And the third is any excavation or dig project for which the project owner chooses to use a dedicated locator. So here's another two questions that we have from the previous sessions. Just going through there, how will a new DL model impact administrative burden costs? This is actually a fairly common concerns that we come across within what we have seen. Yes, so initially there is some additional administrative work initially when setting up DL. However, there will be, it will taper down once the process and draft has been produced. And this is what I've discussed in previous slide here. As more DLSPs are coming on board, you set them up on the initial setup. Most likely, another project owner coming across your area, they will be using same list of active DLSPs that's already on board there. So in some cases, that burden will lessen in terms of procedure-wise or onboarding. And the focus really needs to be taken back to, yes, there'll be additional burden operationally, but it's going to remove the cost from your end as a member where there are unbudgeted for these external capital programs. And overall, it's going to save you money in terms of that. You got to look at it as that, yes, there's that initial burden, but once this project is set up, that's pretty much it. All the locates, the burden itself, it's all going to the project owner supplying the dedicated locator from that point in. Another question here is in most cases, and especially for experiences that we've seen for municipalities, that utility owners have their own locators on staff. So, most members have already faced the brunt of the fiber builds. So we've seen fiber build comes across as nothing something that's been going on years, and major capital builds that's going across. And those members who are unable to keep up and recognize the benefit, and they do recognize the benefits of a DL program. But there is a few groups where we have seen that have been able to keep up, but with that, their exposure is very limited, right? So it's not a full brunt fiber installs. It may be in a location where it wasn't a full force installs that's required of full force capital projects where the requirements or needs of 100 locates and within a 30-day span or even a week span does actually happen and occur, especially for fiber to homes. In most cases, a lot of fiber to home projects are calling in hundreds of tickets on a 10-day basis and or 30-day basis, and yes, they are able to complete those projects or those requests or those 100 different locations in terms of installs, in terms of installing their fibers within those 30 days. So it's really a heavy burden on the public side. Therefore, on the DL side, it is very beneficial for to not use your own resources, but take on the project owner and what they're supplying as a resource. So in general, as a member, you're paying for an internal locator to locate someone else's capital build. And really, this isn't a good use for taxpayers' money for municipals. If we're speaking of municipality members here, especially when the funding is on this part is already very limited for some of you. So using that funding of your own locator staff and whatnot, when there's a project, taking on that burden away from you, and that's what dedicated locator is. So, putting these tickets on DL will move the cost to the project owner and free up your own resources to focus on regular locates and even your own projects to do, to be in benefits of your taxpayers in this case, right? So that's what I have right now for update and some of the coverage for the frequently asked questions. At this time, it's an open forum. It's a discussion that we can have here. Whether or not you have a questions to our team here from the Terra One call regarding dedicated locator, or if you have any positive or any feedbacks that you want to share with this group, experiences if you've gone through in terms of the service agreements and whatnot, this is the platform to bring that out to get to gather any other information that any members may share around with, right? So at this time, you can unmute yourself. There's also, I just want to point out on this webinar, on the top corner where you see there's several options there. There is a portion there for Q&A. If you're unable to speak and just want to type out your questions, our team can read out those questions through the Q&A section. So you can go ahead and type in your question through there. Okay, Oliver, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question regarding accuracy of infrastructure data. I'm sure that we're not the only municipality that doesn't have 100% confidence in all of the documentation spanning back over 100 years that says where all our stuff is. And I'm just curious to know if you guys have had any interaction or feedback from other members who've had to go through a designated locator agreement under similar circumstances. How are other people managing the liability implicit in this problem?
So it's a really great question. It's something that we are constantly going through with multiple members and DLSPs itself. So first off, to cover that portion is under the legislation, it does stipulate there that the members must provide, accurate mapping of your infrastructure for the dedicated locator to safely locate your infrastructure. So that's clear cut through the legislation. So however way that you can provide the most accurate mapping is part of this legislation. Now there are some cases, yes, I understood for municipalities, there's several old records that are at not standards. So it's something that you got to work with. In most cases that we have is that there is a mediation portion there where the member and the DLSP can take us can have those discussion and see how that record would look like and how you locate your infrastructure currently right now with those records, whether or not that could be integrated with the DLSPs and their own process. And perhaps you can utilize as a member, you can also utilize that DLSP. They are producing a locate paperwork that is a form of record once it's completed accurately with a locate. So entail you can take that back and update and provide, update your record based on that most updated locate that they provided on site. So really, for say at the end of the day, the legislation does say that you have to provide the most updated and accurate mapping. And how so you can provide that, you can work that with the DLSP. In terms of liability here, and it's a very it's a topic that's gone through across all required stakeholder, well, all required parties through a dedicated locator. The liability really goes back to each individual entity. So speaking to that is, as a member, you have the liability to provide the most accurate mapping to the DLSP and have updated records to however you need to update that. As a DLSP or as a dedicated locator service provider, they have to be competent to and also have that liability to locate your infrastructure safely and properly based on the information that have been provided to them. And then going back to the project owner, they have their own liabilities itself in terms of how they read the locates or acknowledge the utility locates that's provided on hand of when they're doing the excavation. So there's really the liability goes to each individual party. So it doesn't fall back on one liability only towards the DLSP or towards the member or towards the member. Each individual party will play a part of that liability.
Excellent. Do you have any specific information from other members who've navigated this situation? Like,
we offhand, we have several ones that's going through. I really can't names right now, but we can touch base back with you after this call to kind of direct that to, or maybe anyone on this call right now who are going through that navigation can just speak up on this. If not, Oliver, we can trace back to some of our conversation that we may have and provide you some, information based on that, and perhaps you can reach towards to that member.
okay, thank you.
No problem.
Marco, we do have a question from the Q&A from Greg F. What is the typical length of time it takes to enter into a DL agreement?
Well, it really depends. Timeline wise, and this is where the legislation does stipulate and does recognize that it can take up to 90 days to set up a project from start date of a dig to the initial project acknowledgement to Ontario One call. Obviously there's a lot of coverage in terms of that agreement, how that service agreement will look like between the DL. Really, for say, we tend to say 90 days or aim towards the 90-day project setup. But there's certain circumstances, especially when it's the first time around, for many of us, for many of you, where there's legal, there's legals that are involved with that needs to be reviewed, and we all know that, once it gets to the legals portion of it, timeline-wise could be, can take quite a while. So hence the reason why we can't really define that at that point. We recommend to aim towards the 90-day window time. But if it does need or surpasses that, then that member should and also just communicate that with the project owner or the DLSP. In that case, they can go into an alternative timeline where they can produce an alternative timeline that they can agree on to produce this dedicated locator agreement. Hopefully that answers your question there, Greg.
Sorry, the record, there's no other questions in the Q&A.
Okay, so we have another question there. Currently gathering data to be shared. For areas of request, it was a low res PNG of area of interest. Is there a way to develop more specific parameters? Sorry, I need to expand it. As well as I've been dealing with several different participants. Just a question and comment. Streamlining and project parameters to be submitted to assist completion on our end. So Monique, with that, I believe you're inquiring regarding towards the project map that's provided, or just the project scope based on that, right? With that being said, is that there are some cases where it's a regional base. We tend to, and project owners do, provide as much detail as they could based on the project requirements. So some fiber to homes, they do have, the initial regional where they are doing the fiber builds. They provide as much information they could, and there may be some that are under discretion of sharing exactly where the locations are. So the selection of the full region is sufficient enough at that point to provide the area. Now, as a member, it's something that you just got to work with the actual project owner and kind of obtain this information, whether or not it's 30 days before the project start date or however earliest time that they can provide you more defined mapping. But the initial request that you need to look into is the initial requirements for the dedicated locator service provider. So the service agreement of how that locator would, or that service provider can provide locates of your infrastructure. That is the main thing you can look at, and just acknowledging that you're accepting dedicated locator. In terms of mapping, it's something that you can work with the project owner throughout the project duration to provide you more accurate details. So in most cases, municipality wise, these projects will still have to go through the standard process of permitting their projects. So most likely it's going to come across your board as well to when or where this exact specific work is going to be completed, right? So by then, that's where you can determine exactly where these locations are, and from that point in, you can provide mapping to that specific location based on their submission of their permits for that particular work. So there's a lot of workarounds to it. It is not black and white from the initial. Project owners can provide information from the start with, and there may be some more further information that could be provided as the project expands and develop more. And that's just something the member and the project owner can work hand in hand. But what we're looking at initially from the start is just agreeing onto the dedicated locate model and the selected dedicated locate service provider, and with that the recommendation of a service agreement could be put in place by the member with the dedicated locate service provider. Then the mapping can all fall into it afterwards. So we have another question there on the chat from Bruce. What about emergency locates? Emergency locates does not fall under dedicated locator. Under a dedicated locator model, they do have that single resource dedicated locate service provider on site. So regardless what type of locate it is based on that project, it's taken as a regular locate. So if it's an emergency locate on a standard process, but it's under that project, it's still called as a regular locate because they have that available resources on site. The only reason that it separates an emergency locate to a standard process is, obviously the priority, the urgency of that locate. But when you look at it under a dedicated locator model, that resource is available to that project when and where it's required to locate an infrastructure. So in short form of that, emergency locate does not apply under dedicated locator model. Okay, any other questions? So I'll just go through several frequently asked questions that we're kind of going through. Maybe it'll spark some more conversation in this call. Obviously some of these questions have come across already. What if we do not agree on a selected DLSP for the project owner? It's a common concern that we've seen, or common feedback that we've seen. Going back again, there are legal requirements for members under the ONUS Act to comply. So if there is a valid concern or issues of the selected DLSP, you need to raise that awareness or that concern back to the project owner, and to us immediately within that 10 business days upon receiving the project acknowledgement. But really, at the end goal to that is that we do, the member and the project owner should find a resolution towards a selected DLSP, to comply under the act. So that is put beyond between the member and the project owner to determine a selected DLSP. And at the end of the day, it has to be a legitimate concern, a valid reason to why that that selected DLSP is not approved, or concerns based on that member not proceeding with this DLSP. In most cases that we've seen, it's just declining. It's a member has declined that specific DLSP because they want to offer their own DLSP on site, or they want to, not DLSP, they want to offer their own self-locating resources on site. That's not the proper way to kind of look at it, because if you're looking at it under the dedicated locator model, a dedicated locator model is a single resource to locate all infrastructure on your onto that project limit. So if you're providing your own resource, internal resource to become the dedicated located service provider for that project owner, you're advising that project owner that your own resource can take on all the utility locates for that project. And in some cases, that might not be even feasible, especially in most cases where there's only one or two locators on hand for for um, in-house for that particular members itself, right? So at the end of the day, we want to bring it back to the member and the project owner as per the legislation to come across a resolution towards a DLSP. Second one we can look at here is, touching base again to the draft service agreement. In most cases, going back to the first questions that we have here in terms of liabilities, cost of damages to be it's agreed upon the DLSP, or can it be with the project owner included into the agreement? It's a rightful concern, just how I answered it earlier. There's three common setups that we're currently seeing right now. So one, the dedicated located service provider have an existing contract in place with the utility owner already. So through LAC, or they're already, they're servicing that member already. So that's already a standard contract in place with them. Two is that, the LSP has no existing contract, but enacts a contract directly with the utility owner. So we're seeing some of that occurring right now where, it's between the DLSP and the member directly. But three, there's some cases where the LSP has no existing contract and enacts a three-way contract between project owner and utilities. So really, it's only the third option that creates any direction or connection between the project owner and the utility owner. And it's the path that makes most sense with smaller utilities or as smaller municipalities, as it solves a lot of concerns on the liability and provides more credence to the project with council and any other approvals required, right? But touching base again to that, liability is such a large entity to look at, and based on different angles of liabilities you want to look at, the liabilities between a member providing accurate mapping to liabilities of the dedicated locate service provider providing accurate locate based on the mapping provided, to the liability of the excavator or the project owner completing or proceeding with the work based on the locate provided, right? So as for the liability stands wave, so like I said, either way, in a damaged situation, everything will be traced back to the project owner and the excavator through the contract trail. The LSP will have the liability with the utility owner, and the LSP has then a contract with a project owner who then contracts with the excavator. So all outlining liability for a damage, right? So this is going back again, each entities would have their own liability stipulation under agreement. So it goes all back to each individual I guess party on that point. Yeah, we got a pretty quiet crowd today. It's good. It's either
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I got a question. When I do do my locates and complete them.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to close them out through 360 feedback, because we get emails from the compliance department saying that they're not done, wish they're done on time. So I'm not sure how to do it.
Is it through your ticketing system? There should be a portion there to in completion of the locate.
Okay.
What is the ticketing system you guys are using on your part?
Well, we just get locates from Ontario One, and then we just go out and do them.
Yeah.
But then they say that we don't do them, but they're done on time, and they say go to 360 feedback, but I've tried and I have no success.
Okay, it's something that we can take this back, perhaps with our compliance department or our member services department to walk you through that. So yeah, we can refer you back to member services, and one of our representatives can walk you through it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No worries. If I'll only ask you, Ahmad, there if you can want to email us, and we can forward that directly to the representative you have for our member services, so we can put you over to the right people.
Okay, so that's through member services? Is that what you call it?
Yeah, that's correct. Would you have their email address?
I do not, no.
Okay, I can one of our members here can share that to our chat, or we'll contact you directly to provide that to you. Okay.
That'd be perfect. Thank you.
Great. Okay, anyone else? Okay, so from the previous sessions that we had, we have a large turnout here. We can take it both ways where, in this turnout that we have here, since then we've had a lot of conversations with a lot of the members itself through, taking you guys on through the process and kind of guiding and mediating in some of the pinning points. We do encourage this. As soon as you receive a project acknowledgement from one of the projects coming into your areas there, any questions you may have, just reach over to our team. We can always, jump onto a call with you, kind of guide you through the steps and process. If any pinning points that comes across between you and the dedicated locator service provider or the project owner on hand there, we're more than willing to step in, and that's our role here. We'll mediate for that to find and help find a solution to moving forward to a dedicated locator. But based on our numbers there, we are seeing a lot of progression, mainly with also the municipal side of things. And we are seeing a lot more involvement to municipal members, as I mentioned on our previous slides here, that a lot of these fiber to homes are transitioning over their existing projects that's already within your area there. So take those opportunities. Take those opportunities that once they transition over to the new model, it's not a voluntary basis anymore. You are able to provide them, relieve your resources to them, to not relieve release your burden of locates that's coming across based on their project to them now, to their dedicated locate service provider. So this is something that keep an eye on. It is something that will take away that burden from your side on your compliance side of things. Take away from that 5-day compliance that's required, right? We have one more question there. Go ahead. Is it Oliver?
Yeah, it's me again. So one thing that we're tossing around as an idea here was to hire another internal locator and have that person be designated as an internal locate service provider to external resources, so they would work on those projects only. Is there anything in the act that prevents us from doing such a thing?
Well, it wouldn't make sense because you're still providing that own resource out of your own costs, right? Like the dedicated locator is the reason purpose for that is that project owner is taking that that burden from you, that load of locate requests that will come across their project away from you, and supplying their own resources based on that.
So I realize that we could work a cost recovery program into that agreement. That's not the issue. For us, the issue is because I don't have 100% confidence in the veracity of all of our data. An internal resource has an intrinsic and built-in, for lack of a better word, desire to perform a good locate, right? Because they're answerable to us, right? Whereas an external resource has no such motivation. They could just as easily turn around and say, well, this is the information you gave us and it's wrong, so any problems with the locate I did is your problem. Right. And
well, in that case, there are some cases that we've seen with municipalities where the comfort level of still providing their own resource to come out to locate some of the infrastructure, that could still work under the dedicated locate model, right? It doesn't mean that you're excluding yourself away from the dedicated locator model. You can just build that into your agreement with this dedicated locate service provider, meaning that you can provide a process where, if a locate has come through, a request has come through, that dedicated locate service provider need to provide your, a process of notification to you of where the locate is going to be completed. Therefore, you're able to send out your own resource to come out there and be with that locator and locate the infrastructure or work with that locator to locate the infrastructure together. So that way you have the records, you saw the the resources that's provided by the project owner there, but in hindsight of you providing most accurate locate and the comfort level behind that, you can still send out your own locator. So there's nothing that stops you from that legislation based on that. The only thing on the legislation is that you do have to agree on a dedicated locate service provider. But internally wise of how you can provide that locate afterwards or how you can assist with the model or the program, that is between you and the agreements with the dedicated locate service provider. So like I said, we haven't seen a case where the dedicated locate provider declined that additional resource or assistance in terms of locating your infrastructure. If it helps you locate the infrastructure more accurately, then it's by all means go ahead with that, right?
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Okay, so we're about 15 minutes into our session here. If we have no further questions, we can end this session early. Once again, our contact is here for you guys, deal@ontariooneCall.ca. Reach over to us if you have any further questions or you have any feedbacks or that you want to share with us going forward. On our next month's session, going back to Oliver with the experience of other member, perhaps I can get a member that have gone through the steps and whatnot and kind of just share that experience, that feedback that they have gone through with the group, and that's something that we can work with on our next session here. So we'll send out an invite on our next month's Q&A session, see if we can provide something like that for members here, so that way we can have that more engaged conversation between each other here in terms of municipals and the process and steps that you guys are going through.
Well, thank you. Honestly, what I'm most interested in is because there's other ways to address this, and I'd be interested to see what other members have done to manage their liability exposure, say through the agreement themselves, what tools they put inside that agreement. That's really what I was driving at. I was just wondering whether you had any specific knowledge of what other people had done. I didn't need to know specific, like this municipality did this. I'm not interested in that. It was just like, did you know of anybody that was handling it in unique and interesting ways?
Yeah, and like I said, this is the open board and forum for each individual members that may have that experience, right, and have gone through. So definitely it's something that we can reach for any other members here or outside that we have had that conversation if they want to, share those knowledges with the group here. So it's definitely something we'll keep into our next session here.
Perfect.
But thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's no any further questions, I'll give you back about 12 minutes of your time for this session. Once again, thank you again for registering to this session. It is a good forum for everyone here to get our updates to what's currently happening with our team, with Ontario One Call and Dedicated Locator model, how we're all progressing moving forward. Yeah, we'll just continue having these conversation and have our conversation to progress forward. Okay, have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.